Hi everyone, I am just waiting to get started. I hope I'm able to get started. I hope this is streaming properly. Please let me know if it isn't. I will start in a minute, actually. I am in my studio right now and I'm just getting the last few things that I need to start. Let me just let everyone know. All right, so now that we're here, I'm just going to get started on, well, how to do a pastel portrait. And the photo I sent you, I hope you guys have it. It is, hold on, let me just save the image properly. Yeah. we go. Oh well. There you go. I've got it right here, pulled up. And so the first thing you want to do when you get started, let me just flip the camera and talk for a little bit. So, pardon me, I'm a little bit tired and my studio is really, really messy. But the first thing you want to do is to make sure your hands are protected because you're going to be using pastels. And that's kind of like pure pigment. So I like the gloves in a bottle. They form like a layer over your hands and everything washes off quickly. So you do want to make sure that you're safe. I have a very nice ventilated studio, so that's very important. And then I also have, let me just change the camera. I also have some of my pastels out here. These are hard and soft pastels, and I will be using them. So when we do a portrait, you want to make sure that you have a really good idea of your composition. Your composition is kind of everything in this. And I have in front of me a really nice piece of paper. This is, let me just move up closer here. This is the Clairefontaine Pastel Mat. I don't know if you've ever used it, but I really like it for portraits. It's very gentle. I was going to use UART, but I'm not able to. I prefer this. If you guys want me to use UART, which is what I had recommended, you are more than welcome to use it, and you can tell me to use that as well. I don't mind changing the paper, but I just use this one because I have it handy. This paper specifically, and also for UART, but to a slightly different degree, it takes soft pastel, like it just sucks it up. So I always start with a harder pastel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through how I draw the face and how I try to get a likeness, because a likeness is very different than, you know, being able to draw what you think you see. I keep saying this, but this is an ongoing theme. So I'm going to take, I'm not going to take like a white pastel. I'm going to take a hard pastel. This is a new pastel, and I really like it for mark making initially. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to get up actually. Let me see if I can move this just a little bit closer so you guys can get a better look. All right, so all right, so I am starting off with an outline. That is what you want to do. You want to start off with the outline of the face. And in this stage, I'm still making a lot of mistakes. I know I will. And I keep referring to the photo, but I'm just making like rough outlines because I'm not going anywhere near being into a detailed drawing. This is roughly where the nose is. Let's make it a little bit higher so you guys can get a better view. There we go. And we've got the lips right here. We've got lips are a little bit. I can go in later and fix that. So even though I'm starting to define the features, I'm really not going into too much detail. I'm just putting a placeholder and seeing where I think everything goes. Where do I think? This is roughly where. So I'm drawing a line for myself, roughly where I think the edge of the nose will be, and I think that helps, that just always helps me place features. So I had brought it a little bit too much to the left, so I'm just going to bring it a little bit more to the right. And doesn't really slope very much there. There we go. She's got really beautiful eyebrows, but she doesn't have that much space in between the brows. So I'm going to kind of just give it a little bit of a gap. If I need to come in and change the location, I can, but I'm kind of trying to look at where the beginning of the brow is in comparison to the nostril, because she is turned 3/4 away from the canvas, from the paper, and it's almost at the outer edge of the nostril. So if we take, for example, here, we go here, it makes sense. Her nostril would end roughly there. So I think this is a safe space to put and it arches beautifully. She has very nice long brows. So we've got that. And again, for the eyes, I'm just going to give it a rough outline. I'm going to see how the eye slopes in like this and then goes back down. And it doesn't quite come down so much. So that is a hint to me. pay careful attention to how the eye relates to the nose, because it doesn't slope and you don't see the inner corner of the eye at all. It stops somewhere in between, and you don't see this, you don't see the completion of the edge of the eye, so you have to stop right there. And when we actually get to putting in color, we're going to do just that. And so her eye starts a little bit outside of the edge of the nostril, and we'd kind of determined that the nostril is roughly here. So pay attention to the shape that the eye makes. So it starts like this, goes up. If you want to check if it's in line with the other eye, what I do is I just kind of dot it and move it exactly horizontally. So I kind of dot it over here so I know where to put the other edge of the eye. So the eye goes up sharply, makes a little shape over here, goes up sharply, and then has gentle rounding and then slopes down. And it stops at roughly the same latitude as the beginning of the eye. And I'm going to put in the pupil, and a lot of people want to make the pupil round. It is not round when we see it. It's a bunch of other shapes, but it's not necessarily round. So resist the urge to make a circle over there. It's got a fold over here of the eye. A little bit of a fold over there as well that we're going to develop. And remember, this is really rough, so it doesn't matter. We can always change things later down the road. So I'm going to take a look and see where the edge of the lips are in comparison to the edge over the nose. And it's almost at the tip. So her lips end roughly somewhere here. So I made a little oops. And I'm going to develop that just a little bit later. And remember, this is all about relationships. So you want to see where the edge of the lips end in relation to the eyes. And they end roughly here. So I'm just dotting that as, because I know I need to flesh out the lips a little bit better. She's got a small slope here before it goes into her chin. Her hairline is really close to the brows, and it makes a little arch over there. And one of the markers of the face is actually the ear. You want to see where the ear relates to the rest of the face. So in her, in this photo, her ear is slightly above the top lip. Yeah. And I made another mistake. I didn't take a look at the angle that the earrings make. There we go. The folds of the cloth slant slightly. So now that I have this set, what I'm going to do is I am going to put in my colors. So her skin tone is, it's got a lot of pink and it's got a lot of gold in there. And one of the things you want to do when it comes to skin tones is you don't want it to be just flat. You don't want it to be just green or, like a beigey color. You want there to be blues, you want there to be greens, and you want there to be even oranges and reds, because that is what will make the color pop. It will make your painting just infinitely more beautiful. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use that same, it's this same NuPastel, and I'm going to use this as my midtone that I'm going to build off of. And let me see, I just broke it. So I'm going to put that everywhere I think it deserves a midtone. And I really, really love these NuPastels. You can do an entire painting with them, just them, but I'm not doing that, obviously. And I'm going to go in with a blue NuPastel right now. It's this color. And because the shading over here has a little bit of blue, I'm going to introduce a little bit of blue in my shadows. I'm going to build on top of it, but every portrait needs a good blue. Every olive-based skin tone always needs a little bit of blue and a little bit of green. Otherwise your skin tones are just going to be flat. I'm going to tone that down just a little bit. It's kind of like a gray. Pull that right above the eyebrow. And I'm going to go back in with a slightly darker color. I'm just looking for my darker color, which one to use. Because I am not sure yet how dark I want to pull this. Actually, I will pull it quite dark. I want a little bit more drama. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add more color and then keep continuing to develop everything as I go along. So this is a Giraud, and I love my Giraud for skin tones. You can easily go over established pastels. It deserves a slightly lighter color, so I'm going to go in with the Ludwig. These are really, really creamy. And the aim is not to completely cover everything that we've done. I want some of the orange to show through. I want some of the sienna and the blue to show through. It just breathes a little bit of life into a painting, just like how our skin tone is. I get asked a lot, when do you blend? I don't really blend. I just let the pigments do their thing. And I just keep layering and layering so that whatever edge I do get seems almost intentional at this point. And I'm going to use a nice olive green. It's also a Ludwig over that blue. This paper really, really holds on to pastel very strongly. So I wouldn't recommend it if you're a beginner, but if you wanted to experiment with it, it's a lot of fun. And now I'm going to add a little bit of orange and pink tones, and I'm actually just keeping them all in my hand, or I put them in a little box, and then once I've figured out the skin tone shades, I just keep reusing them and develop the rest of the face. Just keep layering. All right, I'm defeating my own words. I'm just developing one area too much. I'm just going to go in and see what else I can do. I'm using a soft peachy shade and bringing in lighter areas to the skin. And this isn't a white. And it's a really good idea to keep looking at how the light is hitting your subject. I'm going to bring some depth to this side. Significantly darker, but I'm going to lighten it. Because it's not that dark. It does have darkness to it, but it's not that dark. And again, don't be shy when it comes to using colors like greens and blues. I cannot do a portrait without greens and blues and purples. I'm going to add just a little bit more pink in here just to kind of lighten this up. Doesn't really make that much sense right now, but we're getting there. So I'm going to now take a dark new pastel. I think this is the same one that I used as the shadow. And I'm going to use that for the brows. It's not a black. I didn't want to use a black because I'm still just putting everything together. And if I need to, I can kind of change things. You can tell I'm not being very good about it. And make note of how the brow arches. Over here, I'm going to go with a slightly darker olive green. She's got a lot of olive in her skin tone, and there's a lot of darkness right by the eye. So I'm going to give it a little bit of blue as well. It's that same blue new pastel that I used. It's like more like a turquoise, but I like it. It just pops. And when I go over it, it's just nice. I'm going to go with a slightly Now I will push some of that sienna-ish color in there. Or it's kind of like a yellow ochre almost. Let's see how flat that looks. It's a little bit of a shadow that I'm just gently kind of blending in with my strokes. And the darkness of her temple area goes from here all the way into here. Now that we've finished the top part, we're going to go and do the darkness over here. And the lower part of her eye is significantly darker than the top part. So we have to go, I'm going to go in with the same dark pastel, new pastel, and I'm going to define this. And I'm going to define everything else with it. Just give it a base layer of darkness, I suppose. But not everywhere. I'm just going to give it a little bit of darkness right there and kind of follow the plane of the eye. But the darkness primarily is like this. So I'm going to go in and go over it with a blue because it's a very blue-green area. But I want those two colors to tell the story. So now that we have that established, what I'm going to do is go in and blend the remainder of the color like that. It's a little deeper. And then there's lightness right next to it. becomes a little bit lighter as we go along, a little less intense. You almost get like a highlight. It's not quite a highlight, but it's almost a highlight. So I'm just going to put this and then layer something else over it. Same goes for here. It's almost a highlight. You can use your fingers. That's what I do. I don't really blend. I just don't see the point in it. So I'm going to add a little bit more highlight here, lighten this up just a little bit. Because there really is some of that. There's that soft, almost like a highlight. The skin just lightens significantly. So I went over that darkness to kind of lighten it up. And what I'm going to do now, finish this and give some definition to the eyes. And this looks like a black one. It's a black new pastel, and I really like these. Challenge that shape a little bit. I made the pupils a little bit too big. So I'm going to go in, and remember, the whites of the eyes are not always white. Sometimes, like now, they are gray. Refine that. There we go. If you make a mistake, that's okay. Clearly it's okay because I'm making mistakes as I go along and fixing them. So much better. Remember, the eyes are also, the folds of the skin above the eyes, they also have changes in darkness and light. It's a little bit darker over here, much darker over here, and it gets lighter. Got some lightness. If you hear that creaking is the sound of my chair. And I'm going to break up that line for the eyes. I just don't want it that's dark and that. Same goes for here. This it's going to be, I use that though to define the eye and to give slightly more definition as we go along. So the whites of the eyes do significantly get a little bit lighter, but not completely white. So I'm going to go in with a little bit of a pink and a gentler white. And it's kind of like a pinkish color, but it doesn't read as such. It just reads as a nice white. I can tell I'm making lots of mistakes with the eye. It's very frustrating. That happens. And I'm not going to leave the eye completely black. I like to add some variation to the tone. It just otherwise doesn't read natural to me. Oops. I'm doing all the good stuff that I did there. Darkening this ever so slightly. And I darkened the sides of the whites of her eyes because they were just too white. And I'm going to give it a catch line because that's what she has, and I find there we go. She looks a little bit more alive as we speak. I'm just going to dot ever so lightly under the eyes and give it a little bit more definition. This. So now I'm going to go in and darken up her brows as well, because we can do that. And again, remember that even though the brows are black, They're not always black all the time. So we're just going to give it change in even temperature. Because if you look at the face, I see I brought this way too high and way too to the side. So I'm just going to pull it in a little bit because I don't need it to be that away. Do I? Yeah, I'm going to pull it in a little bit. It's a little bit gentler of a slope. And I like that better. There you go. Okay, I think the top part is what's bothering me. The top part starts here. There we go. That's much, much, much better. All right. So now that we have all of this established, I'm going to go and put in highlights on the other side of her eyes. I'm not going to put in more of the light on her face. Let's put it that way. And define the rest of the face because we don't need to sit and obsess over an eye. Need to get the rest of the features ready to be painted. Well, I'm eating my words again. And I'm going to put in the yellow ochre, or whatever color it is, this mid-tone. Pay really close attention to what the shadows are telling you. And I really like doing a mid-tone in the middle and just kind of establishing everything with the mid-tones because it's easier to push the mid-tones and make them darker or lighter as we go along. Fair bit of blue over here, even though I just gave it and just going over that lighter color. And lightening that up even more with a salmony color right here. So I should probably, at this point, go in and define the nose and the other eye, and at that point, like, the portrait's just going to start painting itself. Pay really close attention to how the nostril makes a shape, because it doesn't just make a random shape. Like, it's not always like a teardrop. It's got its own shape. Each person has very different shaped nostrils, and it's a good idea to really pay attention to how they behave, the nostrils. It's got lovely nostrils, actually. It's a weird thing to say, but she really does. There we go. And it curves into her nose, which is quite defined right here. Now it goes up even just a little bit more. There you go. That's how her nose goes. And I will just push in the highlight and push in the right side, the left side of her face a little bit more. And eventually, if I want to develop this portrait more, I'm going to push the darks and the lights just much, much, much more. Because it's... Right now, this is more of a sketch. And I think it could really benefit from more intense darks and lights. It's good. Almost. This is a really dark color, and I don't want to go that dark, but I am going to use it as a base for the rest of the face. Like, I'm going to use it as part of the underpainting because I want that reddishness to kind of show through, because it's a very specific shade that is there in her face right now. So I'm bringing the green into the shape of the nostril as well. And it's the best thing to do is to pay attention to what your shadows are telling you. Your shadows are telling you exactly where to put them. Look at what you see rather than what you think you see, and then when you emulate that, you get a more accurate representation. So right here, the flesh tones are a little bit more bright. She's got darkness over here, which I'm going to put in. Like, she's got darkness over here. I'm going to put that in there. It makes a almost like a square-ish shape, and then it goes down. And then the mouth does that. But outside of that, there's light over there. So there's a little bit of darkness over here. And I can add just a little bit of this salmon-y pink color. I believe it's called salmon. Americans do not pronounce the L, which I find odd. And this highlight area is quite light. It must be another light hitting her face somehow. It's like a lighter salmon without the L hitting the face. So now that we have that, I'm going to go and add in those beautiful olivey greens, without which you really cannot do a good painting. A little bit more of that ochre. I want, there's enough darkness in here for me to not want to dilute that. In fact, I'm going to start putting in the jawline over here. And we can define it as we go along. Alright, you know what? It's time for me to do the other eye. I've been putting it off long enough. I apologize. When you look at the photo that I sent, the eyebrow on the left, it has so much variation in tone. So we have to be able to capture that as well. So I'm gonna put my thing over there. There we go. Adding a nice black in the middle, but I'm actually going to use the same blue I used for her skin tone and add that over there, significantly lighter. I'll probably go in and refine that in a little bit. But repetition is all that is good in the world. Like repeating colors keeps everything harmonious. So there's a little bit of darkness right here as well. The forehead is not completely just light. It's got some darkness. So I'm going to bring in some light over here so I can bring midtones there, and that will look much darker because it has context. Context teaches you everything about your painting. It lets you know how light and how dark you need to go. Obviously, that streak of light is too thick. She has a very charming nose. Very, very charming nose. One that I like painting. So I am going to take a look and see if I need to lift the nose. See? Made mistake again. Yeah, I'm going to lift the nose just a little bit. That's okay. That's better. I'm just going to regurgitate that same feeling right here. It's a lot better. I just pushed up the nostril just a little bit and that made the whole thing a little bit better. Now I'm going to go and it's always good to measure. Sometimes it can get really hard with the pastel to get something of a fine detail. So what I do is I go in with my new pastel with a hard edge, but even then sometimes, yes, I do find it a little bit hard and I have to work on that. I mean, you can always go in with a pencil, but I don't really use pencils. I used to, but I don't anymore. I don't know why. I don't have anything against them. I just don't use them. I'm going to use that salmony pink as like this color to blend both those shades together. There we go. And this doesn't curl like that. Much better. So now the other eye is always something that I hate doing because I've got one eye down. And so why would I have to finish the other eye? Let's see what happens, shall we? We need to bring the eye down just a little bit. As you can tell, everyone makes mistakes. I do too. Let's see if I can darken the pupil to satisfaction. This one's going to take a little bit of maneuvering for me to get. Kind of is the shape that I'm going for, but I'll only know later if I need to keep it or not when I add. There we go. And bring this in just a little bit. It's starting to look better. And there we go. Hey, it's starting to look pretty decent. So sometimes you might need to maneuver a little bit for the eyes, but it all works out in the end. Just bring these things right there. And you see how I made this too bulgy? It needs to be more straight. It needs to actually be straight. There we go. Let's see how we can make it straighter. Because our eye doesn't... Much better. Because I have at least the shape of the eye. So this side of the eye is very much in the light, so I'm going to add some light to it. And by light, I mean, I'm actually going to, I'm thinking of just adding like a nice purple. I think that might give it like this light-ish feel. I'm going to give it context so that it doesn't feel like, oh gosh. I'm just going to check how satisfied I am with this. All right, so this, I guess, is just a question of refining it. Same catch light. Add some darkness here, because otherwise it just looks like, it looks very artificial without any darkness under the eyes. So for her under eyes, she's got a lot of darkness, like right here. And I'm going to add that. And I'm also going to add a lot of blue, because otherwise you don't give it context. Blue, I'm going to go in with that ochre color. And now I'm going to pull in some highlights, because this is the lighter side. Here we go. So now that we have this established, I'm going to go in and punch up the highlights a little bit. going to add in a little bit of that soft pinky color because I want to give her pinkier cheeks. Bring some darkness out here as well, because otherwise that's just not realistic. All right, so I'm going to go in and define the nostril. I'm going to have there we go. We are going to just pull the nostril in just a little bit more. I'm going to pull it in even more. And they're actually somewhat of a highlight over here, so I'm just going to see, I have the shape all completely wrong. It goes up like this. I need a harder pastel for this. I just do. So it goes up like this, then arches slowly, and then like that. And this arch is not that pronounced. It's softer. There we go. And slopes downward. And it's never really so strong. There we go. That looks so much more like her nostril. And you don't have to define everything. You can let the reader or the viewer define some of it. which is what I like to do anyway. Just go over it slightly. What I'm doing is I'm giving a hint of the nostril, apparently more than a hint, but still giving it enough definition and enough distance from the surrounding colors that it still works. That's what I'm trying to do anyways, because I'm messing up. And I'm going to add a little bit of green here. Add more green here, kind of soften up this definition. There we go. Much better. Much, much, much better. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give their light, because that's what happens here. And there's darkness here too, because you've got that skin folding. Right over there, and it goes into the rest of the cheek, and even got a little bit more of that pinkness. Let's just define this a little bit, shall we? There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually introduce just a little bit more light into her face, because I think right now we can define that. And just kind of blend that into the rest of her face. I'm just going to use that softer color, take away the edges. So I'm going to put in more highlight over here. And bring in just a little bit more highlight so the rest of that area makes more sense. And she's got highlights everywhere over there. There we go. And this area is much lighter. So just adding more layers will help define her face. And like I said, I don't really blend, but if I need to, I will. And in the shadows, as always, I'm going to use a little bit of green. Bring that out. And I'm going to just add some darkness. I'm not going to super define that part of the face, the nostrils, that is. I like it this way. And I like to use two different variety of greens to kind of play with the way the face makes a shadow. And that's a thing with olive skin tones. They have a lot of green in them, and people want to just stick to the traditional colors of the skin, but you can't make it come alive without some of this, to be really honest. It has to have, otherwise it just looks flat and lifeless to me. And because I didn't define it so completely in the beginning, I'm able to move things around. As you can tell, I am doing that. And what I'm doing is using kind of like a I'm going to use that same salmon tone that I used. And it slopes very quickly and it ends right there, the edge of her lip. Pay attention to how the lips slope. And I'm going to go in with a darker color and put that on the side. And I'm going with like a and I'm going in with more like purpley tones and adding definition and blending in the colors where I see necessary. And that same color I'm going to put over here and bring it out. So as I had thought that this time would be enough, but we're kind of sort of running out of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish off the mouth and I will develop it and I will complete it and put that video over here. But I've got a while to go. There's no way I can, even though I want to. Her mouth is looking pretty okay. It's not horrific. She's doing better than I thought she was. I'm adding a little bit of purple tones. Because that's what I see, actually. There's a fair bit of purple in her lips. And you know what? I'm someone who gets really, really nervous when I paint on camera. So I really do hope this was useful to everyone. And this needs a highlight. The lips need a highlight. It needs lighter shades. It needs light to be able to catch the light off the face, because that's how it goes. And now I'm just going to quickly put in the area right under the chin. I'm going to soften up that brown. And let's never forget that wonderful little ochre bit that I have that I use so often. And I'm actually going in and softening the edges of that because I want to lose the edges of those lips. I've defined them over here and want to lose them over there. I just find that very beautiful, actually. Just the lost edges are some of my favorite things to do. They just make it seem a lot more painterly. A good lost edge makes the world of a difference to a painting. Let's add a little bit of highlight to this too. I made a boo-boo. So I'm going to go in and this part, although this part is very light, you only understand how light it is when you understand the context of what you're doing. So let's give it even more context and even more drama. A little bit of blue, and I am almost done. I will wrap this up in a few minutes. To there we go. I like the blue peeking through there, but I'm going to add in a little bit of the flesh tone. And here we go. Like a nice brown as well to kind of change up the sallowness in the blue, but to still have it peek through. And over here, this part still gives you just a little bit of that lighter shade peeking through. Pay really close attention to how the light hits the face. That's all I can say. Because once you understand that, you can just go on forever, really. It all just kind of becomes very, very fun. It's got a little bit more highlight here. You see how that top lip highlight just kind of made everything a little bit better. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go in with that yellow ochre and push the darkness away just a little bit over here. because it's not super dark all the time, everywhere, all over the place. And just use my finger to give it some darkness. I'm going to give it a little bit more darkness here. It deserves that. I don't know what happened there. I'm just going to add this one. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to define the rest very much because, well, we just don't have time. There's definitely something of a highlight over there. But I am just going to give slight definition to the jawline, and then if you are interested, I can show you in another video how I finished it. And if you painted them along with me today, I love that. I think that's so cool, and I would love to see what you did and how you did it. And if you want to, you can just email me. My email is on my site, and I make so many boo-boos, so many. Just so many mistakes once in a while. So there we go. I am done for today, because this can always be developed some more. And I think this painting would really look nice once it's done, but I just don't have the time. To really finish it up the way I would like to. So that is why this will have to do. And I just got a text. What I will do is I will have the remainder of the painting done in another video, and you guys can watch it. And I really, really hope that you learned something. And if you do take away anything from this, it is that proportions are everything. Skin colors are not just browns and pinks and yellows, but they are greens and reds and oranges and blues as well. And context matters. Context gives your painting a place, and it gives your colors anchoring. And that is about it for me today. I hope you liked it, and if you did, let me know, and you can